All right, in this video, we are going to work on building out a cash flow statement within an Excel financial model, and we're going to be using a Argus monthly cash flow report. We're going to set the model up formatted just like this, which is super presentation friendly. And the beauty of it is that once the Argus cash flow is copied and pasted in there, the model will update with the click of a button. So let's get into it. All right, so to get started, I've got a Argus file opened up here. This is just a example file, but basically what we're going to be doing is going to our property reports here, and we are going to be basically bringing these sets of cash flows into our financial model. And this is typically how most groups will do it, where we'll do lease revenue and things like that, and vacancy factor, other revenue, operating expenses, and capital improvement projections. We'll do that all in Argus just because of how easy it is to kind of input that information. You don't need to create any dynamic formulas within Excel. We'll just get all of these cash flows as just a Excel printout that will just be values. And then once we have those values as the base, then we will layer on things like debt and other fees and other assumptions and things like that. Most of the time we'll be doing our sale assumption, purchase price, things like that in Excel. So to get this export, we are going to export the monthly version of it. So we'll come up here and click 12 to get the monthly, and then we'll come up to report and click export. And when that exports, it's going to be a file that looks like this, with basically some period of time into the future. You have a level of projections that are going to come out of that Argus file, and they will just be values, but because all the calculation is handled within Argus. And so this is the way that we typically do it: is give me the monthly detail of all these projections, and then we can take that information and we could roll it up to yearly, quarterly, monthly, however we want to look at it in our Excel DCF. But kind of the base layer of it is this monthly cash flow set here. So we will close that for now, and we are going to set up kind of the basis of our DCF monthly and annual cash flow setup in this model. So what I did here is I created 3 separate tabs. One of those tabs is just going to house that export report. So I called that one Argus monthly cash flows. And this is going to be a format very similar to if you've seen any of my other videos. We just have kind of an Argus dump tab here where we're just going to copy and paste the values of that report wherever there's kind of like an indicator to do so. And then from there, we will have more of a presentation friendly, but kind of those values that are in there will pull into a monthly set of cash flows that we will use for our actual GCF. And this is going to be where most folks will calculate IRR off of and some of the return metrics. And then you'll also layer in monthly debt cash flows and other kind of investment cash flows. So very important to have the monthly cash flows. And then obviously the Argus export will kind of feed that. And then, like I said, we're going to get all the way down to net operating income and cash flow before debt service. But then after that is where most folks will layer on leverage and sale assumptions and things like that. And then even a waterfall below that. So this is kind of the base of it. And then we are going to end up with an annual cash flow here, which is just going to be a roll up of all those monthly cash flows. And really, this is going to be more of what we are going to be creating for kind of a presentation format. Typically, if you're presenting a model or wanting to look at it in kind of more of a cohesive way with a capital partner or a potential buyer or something like that, you're going to look at it on a yearly basis. It's usually just a little too much detail to have the monthly in there. So this is what we want to end up with that's fully populated, really easy to read, and prints really nicely. So to get started, we are going to take the monthly cash flow tab here, and we're going to come over and come to cell C3, which is just to the right of that arrow I have pointed there. And we're actually going to go back to our Argus export, and we're going to come to the very far left upper corner of that whole report. So for me, it's cell A10, but right kind of at the beginning of all those values. And we're just going to hit Control-Shift-End, and that's going to select everything that's in that report. So that's everything that we need. We're going to copy that, and we're just going to paste it into the cell to the right of the arrow. Perfect. So now that is in there. we're going to go ahead and come over to the monthly cash flow tab where we're going to start pulling some of the information into what would be more of our DCF model. And I'll walk you through some of the setup that I have here, and then we'll get to work on creating some of those formulas that'll pull the information over. So I have, kind of a general just monthly setup here. I think this runs out to 121 months. So this is set up for a 10-year cash flow, which is pretty typical. I mean, most of the time groups are not going to be looking at longer than 10 years. So this should cover what we need to do. And basically what I have set up is this is kind of the timing information right here. I have a start date set up that's going to kind of drive the relative dates that happen here. Most of the time, this is going to be set up on a general kind of inputs tab for a financial model. And then I set up kind of just buckets of different cash flows that we're going to pull through. And these are going to look the exact same in Argus or really any financial model every single time. So I kind of just set those up as constants because we don't need to pull them over from the cash flows. So I have operating revenue, scheduled base rental revenue, which will basically be the sum of everything that's in the orange box here. Same is true with expense recoveries, so like triple net income, and then other revenue, so parking income, antenna income, things like that. Again, the potential gross revenue is going to sum all of the line items that are in the box here. This will be kind of our vacancy factor line item. We can do credit loss as well. Most people do vacancy factor, and that will kind of net off to get us to total revenue. And then we have operating expenses. All of those line items we're going to pull, directly from the Argus sheet as well, which will get us down to net operating income. And then after that, we've got leasing costs and any capital costs like capital improvement or anything like that. And then that is pretty much it to get us all the way down to cash flow, but before debt service. You could also kind of think of it as an unlevered cash flow. It's just going to be at the property level. It's not going to have any other, line items coming off of it yet, like, acquisition costs, closing costs, any reserve accounts that you might have. It's just going to be, your unlevered operating cash flow, basically. So to start off, like I said, this is where we're going to kind of put in our relative dates. And here I basically just have kind of a month counter. And I'm going to have months in two different places, and I'll explain why. But to start off, I'm just going to do basically a time zero. And so this is the date we usually do, 1 day before acquisition. And that's just basically to get acquisition cash flows in there. To get an IRR, you have to have some negative cash flow at the beginning. And so that's where that will go. And actually, the way we're going to do that, we're going to use the EO month formula to get all the relative dates here. So I'm going to go into the month one column, and I'm going to do EO month. And I'm going to take this start date, and I'm actually just going to put a 0 there, and that'll just give me the month end. And we're going to do all these cash flows based off of a month end. And so to get the time 0, I'm just going to do basically the day before that. In reality, a lot of times you'll have kind of cash flows prior or cash flows on the same day as an acquisition, but we want to separate those two things out. And for the sake of this example, we're just kind of doing operating information anyway. So this won't be super relative, but once we get to month one here, that's where it's going to be really relative. And so to continue this formula out, we're going to do another EO month, and we'll just do start date, and we'll do 1. And that's where we get to our, monthly time signatures here. So I'll copy that out. All right. And then in the line right below, we're going to do what the actual month is. And so that if you look at the Argus cash flows, you have a date here, and then you also have month 1, and that's basically the number of months in your analysis, right? So that's a pretty common way for us to refer to different time periods, and that's what we're going to use to kind of pull Argus cash flows over, is we're going to use that month line. And what you can do, which we're not going to do in this model, is you could just format these cells to have the month number here, and then in the formatting have the word month before it. We're actually going to do something a little bit different here, and I'll explain why. We're going to do a text formula. So text and then the word month with a space in quotations, period, and then nothing for the format. And we're going to do an and sign. And then we're going to come up here and just grab that number. And that's going to give us our month. Copy that all the way out. Okay, and then we're going to do the year here. This will help us, not only keep track of where we are, but also pull to our annual cash flow. So to do that, we're going to do a round up function, and we're going to come up here to the kind of unlabeled month. So just where we have, the number that's counting up, and we're going to do divide by 12 to 0 number of digits. And then that's going to give us the year. And this is actually just formatted as a number with the word 0 in front of it. So the way I did that is I come to the format cells section, and I come to number, and there's a custom section here. And basically I'm just doing the word year with space in quotations. And so whatever number shows up will have the word year in front of it. And so we will copy that all the way out to the right as well. And now you can see every 12 months, the year will change. And that's going to be basically how we pull everything over into the annual cash flow. Okay, so now we're going to get into pulling the actual line items over. For the sake of this example, we're going to keep it kind of simple. But basically what we need to do is get line item names over here, and then using those line item names, we can basically do an index match and pull the value for that line item at any given time out of those Argus cash flows. And so there's a number of different ways that you can kind of get your monthly cash flow tab to automatically pull those line item names. It's a little bit complicated just because you can't just do, link it directly, because every time you put in a new property or a new Argus export, those line item names could be in slightly different places. But so for the example that we're going to do here, we're actually just going to take just those line item names. And you can kind of see how the sections are broken up. So operating revenue down to scheduled base rental revenue. We're just going to take all the line items that would add up to the total there, and then we're going to do the total over on the monthly cash flow tab. So I'm going to take potential base rent all the way down to free rent, copy that, and I'm just going to paste it as a value, Alt HBV, and you can see those just pull in there. Pretty much every Argus cash flow report I've ever seen, these line items are exactly the same. And then as you get into, any revenue that's outside of a lease, so not rental revenue, you're going to start to see different structures, different names, same with operating expenses, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and just pull in the rest of those names and just see what it looks like. Okay, so I have all those line item names in here. You can kind of see how everything broke up. So total expense recoveries, and then I have some other income here. Those will be sectioned kind of differently in the actual Argus export. Total expense recoveries is kind of in another section called other tenant revenue, and then these ancillary incomes are called other revenues. So that's what I was talking about. There's kind of different little sections that'll be put in there that you sometimes wouldn't think of, and can kind of mess you up if you're just directly linking to your Argus report. But everything's in here now, so we can start working on the formula that's going to pull everything over for us. Okay, so like I mentioned, what this formula is really going to be is an index match formula with a couple tweaks to it. We're going to add an if error statement at the beginning of it, so that if there is any error or there's not a value to pull for a line item name, or the line item is missing, we're going to have that function basically result in a 0. Which will keep the model a lot cleaner, and we won't have breaks if there's a ref or an error somewhere. And we're basically going to do an index match off of 2 variables, so the time and the line item name, and we'll need both to have the accurate information in there. So that formula is going to be if error, and we're going to do index, and we're going to index all of the cash flows starting in D7. So the first place that you have an actual value at the very top and to the left, so month 1 potential base rent, and we're just going to hit Control Shift End to select all of that. And we will do F4 to lock that in, and then we are going to select a row number, and to do that we're going to do a match function, and we'll come back to our monthly cash flow, and we are going to select B11, and then we want to lock in that column. So we don't want this anchor to move as we go right and left. So I'm going to hit F4 two more times so that the little dollar sign is in front of the row there, or in the column, I mean. And then that will do that. Oh, and I actually did forget one thing. So before we define this line item name that we're going to look up, we want to use a trim function. And the reason we do that is because a lot of times Argus, like things that are coming out of the report, will have spaces either in front of the word or on the back of the word. And the same thing happens with the month piece that comes out of that report. And that will mess up the index match. And so if we just trim everything, the trim function just removes any spaces in a cell. So that will clear that up. And then now that we have that, we're going to go to select our lookup array. And again, this is for the line item name. So we'll come back to the monthly cash flow, and we will do all of the line item names. So we're just going to go C7 all the way down to C78. And it definitely can make sense to have this lookup array go much farther down because there's going to be a lot of instances if you're using this model regularly that you'll have longer lists of line items. This is just for the example, and we're going to just use the values we have here, but that's one thing to keep in mind. And so we're going to lock in that array because we always want it looking here, and then close that parentheses, and then we want to start on the column. So we want to tell it which column to be looking at, and the way we're going to do that is with another match. And we're going to come back to the monthly cash flow, and we are going to select this labeled month here. And so that's why we needed to do that, is we needed to have something that matched from a text perspective, matches what comes out of the Argus report with those month signatures. And we're actually going to use a trim function again. So we'll do trim, and then this month right there. And we're just going to lock in that row. So F4 twice. And that's good. We're going to close that. And then lookup array will be all of our months here. And we're just going to lock that with F4. And then we want an exact match, so we're going to do 0, 2 parentheses, and then the end of our if error statement, we want another 0. Okay, so we have one mistake here. I actually need to add another trim function on the lookup array for these line item names. So you basically trim every bit of text that is coming from that's being looked up on the monthly cash flow, and every bit of text that you're trying to pull from on the Argus report. So I'm going to need to come back into the formula, and I'm coming over to the lookup array for the line item names. So right before this C7 to C78, and I'm going to do trim, and that's going to give me my text there. And then I'm going to close that. Okay, and then I just need to, I forgot the match type, which needs to be 0, and then close that parentheses. And that should cover it, fingers crossed. Perfect. So you can see the potential base rent that's pulling in month 1 is the same 59,674 that's in the Argus cash flows. So now basically we are just going to copy this same formula, and since we anchored it properly, it's going to work no matter where we put it in this sheet here. So I'm going to just pause the video real quick and copy that all the way across. Perfect. So I literally just copied and pasted the same exact formula that we created up here, just into every place where there could be a blue font line item. So you can see it is pulling all of the rows that have line item names. It's pulling that from the Argus cash flows. And then anything that doesn't have a line item name, instead of getting an error, we're just getting a 0. So that's perfect. So now we're just going to do kind of tally up those line items, and we will be done with the monthly cash flow. So to do pretty much all of these are just going to be sums, but I will just run through them. So scheduled base rental revenue is going to be a sum of all these. And then potential gross revenue will also be, it will be the scheduled base rental plus the sum of all the other revenue. So we'll just select that plus sum. Perfect. And then total revenue will be the potential gross revenue plus the sum of the vacancy allowance in any given period. Perfect. And then operating expenses will just be a sum here for the total. And then the net operating income is going to be our total revenue minus our total operating expenses. And so we have 54,318. Let's just check that against the cash flows. If we come down to net operating income, 54,318. So we're good there. And then we're just going to add the leasing and capital costs. We're going to net that off of net operating income. And what we'll do here is actually sum this up to get the total. And we'll just take our net operating income minus that sum. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm just going to copy those all the way across. Okay. Okay, perfect. I skipped ahead a little bit, so you didn't have to sit there through all that. But now we have a completed monthly cash flow that is pulling directly from our Argus report here. So now we'll just move on to the annual cash flow. And this will actually be a lot more simple. Basically, what's going to happen here is this will just be all directly pulled from the monthly cash flow. And it's just going to be more of a roll up and presentation format. So what we're going to do to pull all the line item names from the monthly cash flow, so we won't edit any cash flow items here. It's just all going to be pulling over. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if, and then we're going to come over to the monthly cash flow and we're going to just start with operating revenue. And we're going to say if this cell that I'm trying to pull from equals a blank, then give me a blank. If not, give me the value in that cell. And you know, which is essentially the same thing as just linking to that cell, but it's just going to clean it up a little bit so that we can go ahead and just copy this all the way down. And I'm just going to paste this formula and recalculate. And there you go. You can see that it's essentially skipping over any of the blank cells. If we didn't do this, this would show up as a 0. But this way, it kind of just pulls whatever's populated on the monthly cash flow. It just pulls it over. So now we're just basically going to do a sum if function just based on the year. So this will just roll up any of those monthly cash flows that are in a given year. So that function is just going to be sum if, sum if, and then for the range, we're going to come to the monthly cash flow, come all the way over here, and we're just going to do our year row, and we're going to start with the year 0 time, and then just come all the way over here, select all those, and we're going to lock that in. And then the criteria, we'll come back to the annual cash flow, and we'll say the year that we are in, and we want to lock that row so that it can move left and right, but not up and down. So we will hit F4 twice, and then comma, and then just the sum range. We'll come back to the monthly cash flow. And again, since this is formatted in the exact same way, we're just going to link to that first row, and we'll still be able to copy this formula all the way down, but we're going to come still to the month 0 time and Control Shift select all of that, and we're going to lock in those columns. So F4 3 times locks that in and close parentheses. And then if we copy that over to see if it's working, looks like it is. And so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this all the way down. Okay, so that's all done, and I literally just took that same formula and copied it into every potential line item area, except for the totals. I usually like to just go ahead and resum those totals on this page instead of pulling them as a kind of a roll up from the monthly, just because it kind of serves as one more error check as you total those up again. Hey, does it make sense on an annual basis? And once you have this in here, you can actually check that against your Argus file. So just to see that, I usually check the NOI and maybe the cash flow before debt service, but just to check, 602,000 is showing up in our Excel annual cash flow. And if I were to pull the Argus file over, we can look at that first year of NOI, 602,733. And one thing to note when you do this, you will get like a lot of times you might be like a couple dollars off on some of these totals. And that's just to do with the way that Argus kind of rounds those monthly figures, because it doesn't show any decimal places. So where we're, coming in and basically rolling up 12 months of monthly cash flows that are already rounded when you export it, Argus may have just like a slightly different number there, but as long as you're within a few dollars, you should be all right, which we are. We're $2 off. So this works perfect. And the only other thing that you might consider on this for like a presentation format is just potentially hiding these rows that don't have values in them. Obviously, they're just zeros, but you can save yourself a little bit of space if you hide those. And so that's what I did here. And this is what we ended up with. So thank you for watching.